Donald Trump says he is worth more than $10 billion, but even though we haven't seen his tax returns, there's evidence that his real bottom line could be a whole lot lower. Here to discuss now is William Cohan. He is a former investment banker and author of The Price of Silence. And Cay Johnston is here as well, investigative journalist, tax specialist, and the author of The Making of Donald Trump. Good evening to both of you. William, first of all, I want you to take a look at this. This is the very first episode of The Apprentice back in 2004. And how many people across the country, this is how many people across the country got to introduced to Donald Trump. Here he is.
It wasn't always so easy. About 13 years ago, I was seriously in trouble. I was billions of dollars in debt. But I fought back and I won. Big league. I used my brain, I used my negotiating skills, and I worked it all out. Now my company's bigger than it ever was, it's stronger than it ever was, and I'm having more fun than I ever had.
So that's Donald Trump, the creation myth, right? Scrappy, smart, successful. Is that the real story?
Part of the real story, yeah. I mean, he is successful. We don't know how successful. We've never known how successful because he hasn't released his tax returns. He's never shared with us financial projections that would allow us to actually figure out what he's worth. Thanks to the New York Times reporting today, we know that when he talks about, how much money his various businesses make, when he talks about his hotels making $50 million, what he's really referring to is revenue, not net income, which we kind of suspected all along. Now we know it to be revenue and not net income, and the net income is a lot smaller. If you aggregate all those small net incomes and you put a multiple on that, like a banker would do, you get to some number, but it's probably not anywhere near $11 billion. Now, does that matter, Don? I don't know. I don't think it matters anymore.
Okay, so David, this is the New York Times, right? They did a deep dive on Donald Trump's finances, which he is referencing today here, and it says they found the big difference between what is reported in income tax forms and what he reports when he needs to pay taxes. So we can put this full screen up. For his Trump National Doral Golf Club near Miami, he reported revenues of $50 million in 2014. But in a tax case, he reports a loss for the property of $2.4 million. 40 Wall Street, a Manhattan office building, he reports more than $5 million in rent revenue on his election form. But on a tax filing for the city of New York, he reports cash flow of just $104,000. So why is there such a big gap with what he tells voters than what he reports to the taxman?
Well, Don, the reason for that is that the federal disclosure forms are so badly prepared and written that, as Bill just pointed out, he can report the revenue, not the income he gets after expenses. And the Times article points out that from other documents he's filed seeking property tax relief and whatnot, that his net revenue on some of his properties is negative, that it's dubious that some of them actually pay for themselves. Just today, a federal bankruptcy judge in Canada ordered the sale of the Trump Tower in Toronto. Now, Trump doesn't own it, but he has the management contract for it. And what did the Trump organization say? Well, the continued success... So understand, when Donald puts numbers out there, they're like his statements about his net worth. They're based more on his feelings and his taking advantage of loopholes in what he reports than any reality.
William, does this give us more of an idea of what his annual income could be, and maybe a huge clue as to why why we haven't seen his tax returns?
Don, I think it does. I mean, clearly if he was just reporting his actual net income from all of these buildings, I think, and in his properties that he owns, I think we'd get a very, very different image of what his net worth is, or on a, not only his whole net worth, which we would know from projections and his income statement and his tax returns, but how much money he actually earned last year. I mean, he referenced, I think in that New York Times article or something, they quoted him saying something like, next thing I knew, I had 450 million or 500 million of income last year. Who would have thought I had 500 million of income last year? Mm-hmm. Well, I just don't think that's true. I think he references revenue numbers as net income numbers, and he hopes that the American people don't notice. I mean, he has gotten a pass on so many things continuously for the last year and a half. I don't understand why we've all given him so many passes, and the people who support him give him these passes, but they do. And so now the impact of when we actually get to the reality of what's happening, that he actually may not be worth $11 billion. He may have a very small amount of net income. He may never have paid any taxes. people just sort of say shrug and say that's Donald Trump, and so what?
In the first presidential debate, Trump said this, David, listen.
As far as my tax returns, you don't learn that much from tax returns, that I can tell you. You learn a lot from financial disclosure, and you should go down and take a look at that.
So he says he uses every tool at his disposal to pay as little taxes as possible, as little of his taxes as possible, and he may not have paid taxes for years and years on end. Is that what this is about, avoiding taxes, or does he really not make as much as he says he does?
Oh, I don't think he makes anywhere near what he says he does. We know from the 1995 Connecticut summary page that got out that his income that year was $19.5 million. That's a lot of money, but that doesn't put you in the billionaire class. There is not now and never has been any verifiable evidence that Trump is even a billionaire. But to Donald, his whole persona is based on he's a winner and he's worth billions of dollars. But the evidence doesn't support that. On the tax side, Donald everywhere goes to extraordinary lengths not to pay taxes. He's filed different sets of numbers with different agencies to not pay fees and to not pay taxes. He asserts that his Westminster Country Club in Westchester Country Club, just north of Manhattan, for tax purposes, he was saying it was worth $1.3 million, over 100 acres of land in Westchester County with a multi-million-dollar clubhouse. I don't think 1.3 million. He's now raised it to 9.
Yeah. David, William, thank you so much.